Welcome to our show today. I am interviewing Jessica, and she has an amazing YouTube channel, T1D Family. We met online actually, commenting on each other's videos, and I'm so impressed with what she's sharing about the parent experience of type 1 diabetes. Today's interview is going to be a casual conversation where we'll talk about what's been coming up for us in the world of YouTube and life with type 1 diabetes from the personal and parent perspective. So, Jessica, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jessica Turcat. And yes, I did my learning from YouTube videos, just like yourself. And after the diagnosis of our toddler son, I wanted more of the experiential knowledge, or as you like to frame it, the lifestyle medicine perspective. And that is how I started my journey on YouTube and really wanted to call attention to the fact that there's the person who has type 1 diabetes and their experience, but then there's also the parental experience and how it affects the family unit as a whole. That was very destabilizing for our entire family. We have 5 children, my husband and I, we have 5 children. And so I think we are seasoned parents, if you will. And yet this diagnosis still threw us into pretty much chaos for quite a while. It took so long to get our foundation, our grounding post diagnosis. And so I really wanted to build something that would support families, but in a whole health perspective post diagnosis.
I love that. And I think all the time that personally, that's the hardest part is the shift in your lifestyle and for your whole family, especially with 5 kids and as young as your son is. That absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And for your listeners, I'm Dr. Hannah. I'm a physician and I've had type 1 diabetes for 20 years. I've got training in lifestyle medicine and nutrition. My intention with this channel, similar to yours, Jessica, was wanting to share a space where I could answer the questions that it took me so long to learn growing up with type 1 diabetes. And in different chapters, I would have different questions come up about what am I capable of? What's going to work for me? How could I navigate this in a way where I feel empowered and not held back by my diabetes? And I found it so hard to find those answers. And it was role models that I got lucky to meet along the way that showed me that path. The intention is to share my insight on what it was so hard for me to learn in my doctor's offices and the in between appointment time, which is really where our life and diabetes happens. And well, tell me, Jessica, I would love it if you started with your son's diagnosis story and tell us a little bit more about how that shook up your family from your perspective.
I do have tissues here and because it still gets me so much. But yeah, he was 2 at the time. And so toddlers are already mercurial beings. So they have their meltdowns. And we noticed that he was progressively fussy and he was always having tummy problems. And so his relationship with food shifted. And we brought him to his pediatrician for his wellness check at 2 years. And she was just keep an eye on it. Like he's lost a little weight, but toddlers fluctuate. And we went a couple more months actually. And then we were having so many behavioral problems. And at night, like one of the tell signs is wetting the bed. And he wasn't doing that. He was drinking a lot more. And my husband and I noticed, wow, he's getting up in the middle of the night and he's thirsty and then he uses the bathroom, but he never had an accident or anything. And so it wasn't until we went to a party, it was at a trampoline park,
Okay.
and he bounced a little bit and then he was just sitting on the trampolines, and I thought, oh, that's not correct, right? He should be going wild. And someone had brought little cupcakes and he had a cupcake. And by the time I left the party with all 5 children and then got back home, he just was lethargic. So I turned right around and I went to an urgent care, and we got him in within a couple of hours, but he was lethargic the whole time. And they diagnosed him with Lyme disease. And I remember at that time I said, he hasn't been in the woods. It's the middle of winter. I don't see that. And they're like, sometimes it presents. And I was like, he also doesn't have a fever. And they're like, it's okay. That's why he's lethargic. So we took him home and started giving him that protocol. And by 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, my husband and I were just like, something's not right. He had started to vomit, and we didn't know it at that time, but he had slipped into DKA and was, by the time we got him to the hospital, he had gone into a ketoacidotic coma.
Oh my God.
And thankfully at the ER, they did recognize pretty quickly, and he was life flighted about an hour and a half away. But he spent 3 days unconscious in a ketoacidotic coma. And my husband and I are both professors too. And this just destabilized what we thought about parenting, and we started questioning our own knowledge base. And then of course I took a leave of absence from work because he stayed a whole week in the hospital, and then I knew going home the transition. But I think what really stood out for me in that diagnosis was how much it made me question my maternal instinct. I've taught at the university for 20 years, and since COVID, I've been teaching specifically mothering courses. So I publish in mothering studies, and I pride myself on mother scholarship and practice. And then here I was in this place where I had missed all of the signs, and I was confronted with a medical community that was giving me advice that did not resonate with how I felt internally, how I should be raising my child. And so, like in the hospital, they were serving him when he woke up pizza and mashed potatoes and corn and milk and like fruit cups. And I know that's standard, but I was like, he can't have any of this. Like he just got out, he had DKA close to 1,000 on his blood glucose. And so I recognized, what are we doing? So I started bringing him healthier food. But even then, when we got back home and saw a dietitian, they said you need to treat the lows with jelly beans or Skittles or a fruit cup, juice boxes. And I said, oh, we don't give our children that junk food. I said that. I was like, oh, our children have never had juice, and we don't do candy. And very rarely do we do the sugary treats, like the cupcake was for the specific party. And the dietitian looked me right in the face and said, welcome to type 1 diabetes. That's going to be your new reality. You'll have to treat with Skittles every night. And of course, like we went back home and I bought the juice boxes and started doing that. And that's when we really hit the roller coaster, because he's 2, and giving him a juice box, so we were up and down. And after about a month of that, I finally got my resolve and said, no, we're going to have to do something different. So we went, for our entire family, we switched to a low carb, low sugar diet. And I did get pushback. You'll hear that. And I had to re-solidify my trust in myself as a mother and what was best for my child post diagnosis. And when I started looking online, I found some communities on Facebook, but I didn't find much on YouTube in terms of type 1 diabetes and health for the entire family. And so that's where my journey is now, a year later.
Ah, okay. That's a beautiful story. And I love that you shared the sentiment about it making you question or think about your instincts as a mother. And to me, that's so insightful because I've heard this from other stories of parents. And looking at it from my side of the street, it seems, what do you mean? You followed your instincts? You took him to the doctor 3 times. You are not supposed to be the clinician. I think you did awesome. For me, it's so funny to see that. For you to share that vulnerably, I think is really interesting because it does make sense. You felt like something was off and you kept asking questions, but got to this place where he was hospitalized and had to be life flighted. And I can't imagine the stress in those moments of the unknown. Where you are now is so remarkable to be at a place where you're sharing with others what you've learned in the last year. I think it's interesting too that you mentioned with having 5 kids that you guys didn't have candy in your house because they were children, not because of the type 1. There were other reasons to not have it, because sometimes I'll see people say, oh, you don't want to be so restrictive for people with type 1, but I'm with you in that I don't know that high fructose corn syrup is healthy for any child. It comes in layers with the nutrition piece. And I think we'll actually see a shift in that just with the new USDA guidelines that were published in 2026. They're offering lower carb options for people with specific metabolic challenges, starting to see changes in the rhetoric there. And I think that will translate out just to present all options that are healthy, of course. Hopefully, we'll see movement in that direction. Tell me a little bit more about that part of being the mom, questioning your instincts. Do you feel like you've regained peace with that? Does it come full
Yeah.
circle, or is it something you feel like still ebbs and flows in your mind?
Definitely. I watched your YouTube video on the USD guidelines. So when I
Oh,
get
thanks.
information like that, it reaffirms like, okay, you are working in line with some medical practitioners, right? And so there is a divide in the community. And so as I've now looked at the broader perspective, then I can see where our shifts can go and what works best for our family. In terms of have I made coming full circle in peace, when I sit and think about the fact that, as our endocrinologist said, like he came within 24 hours of perishing, that still is the part that really gets you how quick it is. And to know that 100 years ago we would have lost him, and it would have just been one of those narratives like, we don't know. It just went, we lost him. So that's stunning. It does. It unnerved me and rattles me still to this day. I find that I have this hyper vigilance. We are now getting our other children tested, their antibodies tested, because I just couldn't shake it. We had them all their wellness checks and everything's fine. And when we've checked their blood glucose and it's in range, but I told my husband, I said, I still just want to know. I still have to have that knowledge. And I see that a lot with parents where they begin to second guess everything and look for clues. And so if you can do simple tests like the antibodies test to relieve some of your fears or nerves, then do that. We bought a sugar pixel because I'm like, I can't get through the night. I have to put additional precautions in place to help me sleep. And getting off like the sugar and the carbs. And I say we're low carb, low sugar, because obviously we still have fruit. That's what we often use berries to treat a low now. And I recognize that children need carbohydrates to some degree. But before I would have said, we're a really healthy family. Like for breakfast, we wake up and we have eggs and croissant. My husband's French, so we always had a croissant and some milk and maybe a banana. And I would have thought, that's lovely. And now I look at it and I think, oh, sugar, carbohydrates, and I see it. And so we've fine tuned and recognizing like, even though we were never the family that would do donuts and pastry and sugary cereals for breakfast, we still had room for improvement. And so now we do a vegetable for breakfast and eggs, and then some type of meat-based protein, very lean because I recognize the sodium aspect too. So then that sets us up. We are not chasing a blood glucose roller coaster first thing in the morning. And I feel better knowing that my children, it took about 6 months to make the transition, but now my kids wake up and they automatically go to the refrigerator and, oh, we had green beans last night, and they know they can get the green beans out and start snacking on them in the morning as I'm making breakfast. That's been the most enlightening part to me as the parent, was thinking that my children wouldn't appreciate healthy food. And there was a transition, I will say that, but now they ask for seaweed. And instead of, can we have a snack? They'll say, can we have carrots and hummus? Just getting all of it out of the house and refocusing. And my husband and I model it also. That has really helped my resolve as a parent, gaining some of that confidence back and knowing, no, I'm making the right decision for my family. These are the healthier options. And seeing our toddler not have those meltdowns, because I'm sure I didn't recognize it, but when he would spike over 400 and then we'd have to bring him down, he was unable to communicate what was happening in his body, but we could see it. Like he would bang his head against the wall and foam at the mouth, and he was just having epic meltdowns. And so a part of that was the sugar and medical trauma that was held over, focusing on that for a good 6 months. And we still practice play therapy. We still do sensory exercises with our children every single day because we've seen the benefits. But seeing his improvement and our overall family's health has really helped strengthen that resolve to trust my maternal instinct and get that back, because it's so important. As mothers, we want to feel confident, right? Like, we want to parent our children and have confidence and be empowered through our relationship with our family, not be constantly second guessing and living in constant fear.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important, the living in constant fear piece. And I think now almost with the Dexcoms and the sugar pixels, they're so wonderful because that data allows us to make actions sooner to turn blood sugars around. But I think too, it's become this constant number we feel like we have to look at and chase. And I was talking this week, I have a couple people I know that have had type 1 diabetes for so long that they were treating their blood sugars before we had a finger prick blood sugar, and they were urinating and looking at a color and trying to figure that out. It's interesting to see how much the extra data impacts our mental health too, because before it was, you test your blood sugar 3 times a day, that's 3 actions and you move on, and it is whatever it is in between. But now it's this constant access to, could I be taking an action for my diabetes? Could I be taking an action for my diabetes? And how to have all this extra data and also create a relationship with it where you're not constantly feeling like you have to optimize it, where you can turn your brain off of diabetes for a little while. Is that, okay, I'm going to take this correction for a high blood sugar. I'm going to check back in an hour and a half, and I'm not going to think about it and check it 17 times between now and then to make sure it's dropping. I think that piece has been really helpful for me with the piece behind it. Tell me a little bit more about play therapy, because that's something that I'm not familiar with, and I'd love for you to share that.
And I do have a leg up on that since I had this previous knowledge in mothering studies. I had actually seen play therapy in action. I worked in an adolescent girls' home for girls who had been abused and removed from homes and placed with the state. And in seeing that, it was an equine assisted psychotherapy unit that I worked with. So I saw the horses and the girls playing in the fields with the horses. And these would be girls who would not communicate. They might be girls who ripped their hair out, like severely abused and traumatized. And yet they would walk out to that field and love on that horse and pet that horse and spend hours talking to that horse out in a field. When I saw, I'm getting upset just thinking about it, but when I saw my own son at 2 years old having these epic meltdowns, and I realized, okay, this is medical trauma. And when I went to our pediatrician endocrinologist, they were telling me it's not related to T1D. Like, you need to get him tested for autism or ADHD or sensory processing or allergies. They're like, have all of your kids tested for other allergies. And I just knew, like, I knew deep down inside, like, he didn't have these behavioral issues prior. And I recognize that some parents will need to go that route and have that tested, that they could be multiple. But for me, I wanted to treat with the least invasive approach initially. And that was at home, parent led play therapy that I could implement alongside his type 1 diabetes treatment. My husband and I had a conversation. We opted not to go to get further testing or medical bills or have him spend any more time in a medical environment. I took off work for a few months and stabilized with him every day, to where we bought doctor bags and we started playing doctor, and we had Rufus. We use Rufus in our house every single day. When I started to see his relationship with his body change, and we got that blood glucose, not perfect, but we got it stabilized. And then we saw, okay, he's having a meltdown, but we're able to work through that. And I used so much of this knowledge of working with traumatized and abused little girls and applied that. That's where we saw the 90% improvement within about 3 months. And I told my husband, I was like, other parents need to see this. I started just recording some of our play sessions and putting them online. And then toddlers will rip off their robots. Like we would lose like 3 a day. We started working on Rufus has his robot, and I was teaching even in terms that a toddler could learn about this. Your body needs to stay healthy, and our robots are healthy robots and help us, and reiterating all that. And I saw improvement and the change in his relationship, his accepting and moving from the medical trauma into a return to childhood. And so that's where I'm like, I want other parents to know that at least this is an option alongside their medical treatment, that they don't have to feel disempowered or nothing's going to help, that they can do little exercises every single day to help their child. And that's been wonderful, is when I have other parents reach out to me and say, hey, I have a very similar experience to what you're describing. Can you help me? Walk me through very simple play. That's been wonderful when they're like, I didn't realize it would be this simple. Yes, it takes the effort, but we're so afraid that I feel like we instantly turn to the medical professionals because I had missed all the signs. So I need to go back and I need more medicine and more technology and more professionals. But actually, your child can benefit from having really focused parental guidance and stability in the home, and to play through it. That's what I hope I'm offering on my channel, T1D Family.
I love that. For our audience, can you share what Rufus is?
Oh yeah, I didn't bring it. He is a teddy bear that's given in the hospital. And so I have my books here. We were given a stack of books for little kids, which is wonderful. I love that. And we were given Rufus, and Rufus has little robots and little pin cushions that you can play with your child. This is through Breakthrough T1D, which is fantastic organization. So I'll give a shout out to them. And so we were given this at the hospital. But if you just go home and you're so overwhelmed and you're trying to look at the numbers and the learning your diet and all of the appointments and the tech, you're so overwhelmed that I realized Rufus was just tossed with another one of his teddy bears over in the corner. It seems so simple, but it's, oh, I need to use this with my child. Because when they give you Rufus, they just hand it to you and you're overwhelmed as the parent. That I think having someone say this, or even show on the videos, I posted one a couple days ago where he's resisting. My toddler was resisting and he's been sick. And so we got Rufus out, and like we had to do little play injections on Rufus with our doctor bag before he would accept his pod change. And so just having Rufus, this teddy bear, around, and he always gets a kick out of it because you can turn it over and he has a little pin cushion on his booty. And so he'll say, to have the pokes in his booty. And so he just thinks that's hilarious. A 3-year-old thinks that is just so funny. And so again, just letting him be in the happy childhood aspect with it. We have to do the little pokes. We have to wear the robots. But other than that, we can be having fun, right? Alongside that. That's how we use Rufus daily in our household now.
I love that. And I love what you said, is that we can have fun along the way. We do the diabetes piece and then we move on with life. And I think that's where most people find the joy, is getting back to being the human in whichever age group they're in with it. That piece is always there.
And I love that you stated like whatever age group they are in, because we do have 4 other children. And so we've been able to implement play therapy. They join the play therapy. And so they have little scrubs, and we bought them little doctor outfits. And so they like the pod changes too. And so they get dressed up and play with brother. And so it's maybe not the 13-year-old. He doesn't get so into it, but definitely the 7 and the 5-year-old and his little baby brother they're just all in it together. So it's a bonding experience when you reframe it from, okay, we've got to get this done because we've got to go on and move on to something else, to nope, we're just going to put all the toys out and get dressed up and play. And the little poke will happen somewhere along the line. Like sometimes it takes 2 hours to do a pod change. But to me, like we were going to spend the evening together as a family anyway. And this is just integrating his medical needs in with the rhythms of our family.
That's great. And I love that they're all involved. I think that support as he grows up, I can imagine, will really mean a lot to him. And that's beautiful. Well, and I'd love for you to share, we've got just a few minutes left, but I would love for you to share what advice you would give to a new mom at diagnosis. You're so close to it and you've got all this great intention about it. I think that would be a great way to wrap up.
I definitely think that just taking time to stabilize yourself as the mother, that is so important. And we want agency. When I talked before this diagnosis, I would talk with women who were postpartum and struggling, and we would walk through their birth experiences. And okay, where have you lost agency? Why don't you feel a bond and a connection or empowered that you can do this? I'm finding the same conversations are taking place with mothers of getting caught up in the medical side of the diagnosis. We've lost our resolve as the mother, that maternal instinct. So really sit and think, what do I need to get stabilized? What kind of support do I need as the parent in general, but I work specifically with mothers? And then what do I want for my family? And listen to that maternal instinct. It's still there and it's so incredibly valuable because yes, we need medical professionals, but they're not invested in the long-term outcome the way that the mother and the parents are. And so that you cannot be replaced. And your child so needs you to be able to show up. So stabilizing yourself, getting your nerves and your resolve squared away, and then getting the support that you need so that you can really lead your family with love and joy and the magic of childhood to where thinking in terms of a decade from now, what's this going to look like? And then 2 decades from now, what do I want for my children? And how can we get back to putting those building blocks in place? And so I really think the mother and the parents steward all of that. But it can be really hard at the outset of a diagnosis. But that's my advice to the parents is to really focus on stabilizing and getting back to the joy.
That's perfect. And I see in my experience working with families often that the parent's relationship with type 1 diabetes is the relationship that the child takes on. If there's a lot of stress about it, that can be picked up. If there's negligence about not worrying about certain things, that can be picked up. It's translated. Not only are we teaching our children what to do, we're teaching them how to think. And if we're stressed all the time about it or all those things, that can be passed down too. I love that. Focus on what you need to restabilize. And that absolutely makes sense. And then that will, without a doubt, have downstream effects. That's perfect. And that's unique. I haven't heard that advice, but I think that makes so much sense based on the patterns that I've seen. So I appreciate you sharing that. Jessica, this has been great.
Thank you, Dr. Hannah. Yeah.
In the description box, we'll have Jessica and my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to connect with either one of us, all that information will be below.
Lovely. Yes. If any of this is resonating, just feel free to contact me. You can go on my channel or on my website, jessicaturcat.com, and just know that I'm another mother along this journey, but that we can support each other. I've had so many mothers reach out to me, and I love that. I love the T1D community is so incredibly supportive. And so if I can give back and support in any way, that's what my focus is at this juncture, is to support other families.
Perfect. I love the sentiment we both have is that we're here because we found value in community. And that's why we're sharing it this way, is that kind of passing it along. And I think that it's special to have what you're doing for families specifically.